with a couple of things, and on top of that, my devices were acting up. But anyway, let me stop making excuses. Charles Radtke versus Mike Malott. This is one of the trickiest fights to actually predict because I don't know. I don't feel like both of them are particularly great. I mean, Charles Radtke is not too terrible, but I mean, he went to a decision with Blood Diamond. What's his name? Yeah, I think Charles Radtke went to a decision. Obviously, that was his debut. Maybe I'm being too hard on him. Plus, Blood Diamond trains at City Kickboxing, so maybe I'm being too hard on him. But he still went to a decision with Blood Diamond, right? And then he went on to TKO. I think it was Mickey Gall or something like that. No, I think Mickey Gall fought Mike Malott. Okay, he then went on, I think, to lose to Carlos Cortez, and his most recent win is Matthew Sermonsberger. On the other hand, what do you call him? On the other hand, Mike Malott, Mike Malott's most recent win is Trevin Giles. I'm not going to be too hard on Mike Malott for actually going to a decision with Trevin Giles because Trevin Giles gave Carlos Prates problems. And up until this point, the only other person who's given Carlos Prates problems is Ian Gary. So winning a decision to Trevin Giles is not too terrible, to be honest. Well, Renia the Rizzler, welcome back. I love this name. What do you think of that woman who called a child the N word and got 500K funding? I heard Guru going off on his chat for supporting her. I actually didn't hear anything about that. Rene de Rizla said hi. Well, welcome, man. I haven't actually heard anything about that. Maybe I need to do a little bit more research on that particular topic. But what the thing about being this complexion is that you get treated like that so many times that you end up being like, what can I do? Especially because nothing really ever happens. The consequences are not too severe. So a lot of the time it happens so much you start to stop caring because you beat someone up, you go to prison, you do anything stupid, you go to prison or you get sued or you lose everything. Like there's quite literally very very few legal remedies to actually but again retaliate or whatever the case is because you can't even take that person to prison. I mean, it's not a crime. So it becomes difficult to actually even have a reaction to things like that happening because they happen so many times. But let me not steer too much away from the purpose of this stream, which is Mike Malott versus Charles Radtke. So for me personally, I think both of them are a bit trashy. I'm sorry to say this about Charles Radtke, but going to a decision, even though it was his debut, going to a decision with Blood Diamond is a bad look for me. He then lost to Carlos Prates via knockout. Anyway, he then lost to Carlos Prates via knockout. Recently won against Matthew Berger, which is not a great win. I think Mike Malott winning a decision against Trevin Giles, for me personally, is better than Charles Radtke beating, but again, Matthew Berger. Maybe I'm crazy, but Trevin Giles, I'm threatened, as I was saying. Trevin Giles was the only other person, apart from Ian Gary, to give Carlos Prates problems, right? Um, Gamer, reluctant gamer, yo, what up, man? You're a bit crazy, as so, so for me personally, as I was saying, I think Trevin Giles' win is a lot more impressive, even if it was a decision than knocking out Matthew Berger in my books. The fight against Neil Magny, it was a bad loss because Mike Malott actually gassed out. But up until that point, Mike Malott was actually winning that fight. Yeah, I love UFC. So up until that particular point in time, Mike Malott was actually winning that fight. So when you go through the roster of people that Mike Malott has fought compared to Charles Radtke, for me personally, I feel like Mike Malott has faced a little bit better competition, has performed a little bit better against better competition. I mean, beating Neil Magny is something that's actually impressive. Even though he ended up getting submitted, that was mainly because of cardio, maybe a couple of stupid decisions, but I think Mike Malott is pretty decent. I will repeat, for me personally, it's a bit sus to be going to a decision with Blood Diamond, who's no longer in the UFC currently. So, as far as the fight and how I see it playing out, oof, I don't know, man. I think both of them are not particularly. I think they're both decent, but I would favor Mike Malott in a lot of the exchanges. I think he is a little bit more well-rounded. He has that bumminess about him, um, in the sense that I don't see him even getting into the top 10. I would be shocked if that ever happens, but I still think he's good enough to exchange wins with a couple of contenders. And in this situation, it's not like Charles Radtke has been destroying talented people on his way up. Who did he beat? I think he beat Urbina or something like that. He didn't beat a lot of people on his way up until he got knocked out by Carlos Prates, right? So I look at the level of opponents in order to make an assessment as far as who I think is going to be a little bit better in that particular fight, and I just feel like what do you call him? Mike Malott has performed significantly better than Charles Radtke. It's not even a comparison because Charles Radtke is going to decisions with Blood Diamond when Mike Malott is going to decisions with Trevin Giles. Almost beating Neil Magny. For me, that's a little bit more impressive and deserves a bit more consideration than knocking out Matthew Summelsberger. So, in no way am I saying I'm going to respond to you, Rizla. I'm going to respond to you. I just want to get these thoughts out of my head, and then I can respond to your comments. So in conclusion, for me, the main reason why I picked what do you call him, Mike Malott, it's basically because of that. Trevin Giles and Ian Gary are the only two people who've given Carlos Prates any type of resistance. Even though Trevin Giles ended up losing, he did give Carlos Prates problems, and that to me means a little bit more than um, beating Matthew Summelsberger or going to a decision with Blood Diamond. So I respect anyone who's picking Charles Radtke because ultimately I don't think Mike Malott is that talented. Charles Radtke has a bit of power. He is a bit aggressive, especially because after the Neil Magny fight, um, Mike Malott has been a little bit more gun shy, for lack of a better word. He's been a little bit more gun shy a little bit recently in his last fight, actually. But in all honesty, I will reiterate, he was winning the fight against Neil Magny. Unfortunately, he ran out of gas. And he actually beat a pretty decent opponent in Trevin Giles. So that means more to me. So that's why I picked him. My subscribers went with Charles Radtke. I still think they are both not that great. So the fight could go either way. Let me actually respond to your comments before I go to the next fight. Um, Reluctant gamer, Islam Makhachev is best today unless you don't respect his religion. Okay. Rene the Raider, Charles is not as well rounded as Mike and is not as good as an athlete, so I'm going with Mike. I agree with you, man. Um, For me personally, the red flag, man, like the red flag was going to a decision with Blood Diamond. That was the red flag for me. Child is the definition of a dog, though. I'm worried. Yeah, I'm also worried because it's not like Mike Malott is that great, to be honest. Fun fact: Mike Malott lost to featherweight Hakeem Dawodu by first round TKO. Why was it outside the UFC? Okay, maybe, but in this particular situation, I just feel like Mike Mallott's experience is going to play a huge factor. I think even losing to Neil Magny is going to humble him enough to actually train and prepare for opponents and actually improve his cardio, especially because he got a decision in his last fight. I think that's going to push him to actually improve a little bit. Um, regional promotion. Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, this concludes my breakdown for this particular card. I was a little bit late, not card for this particular fight. I'm going to break down the next fight, which is Jessica Andrade versus Jasmine Jesu Davicius. WSOF 14 event. Oh, okay. But for me personally, I don't like to give too much stock to regional wins because when fighters get into the UFC, they just go to a different level. But maybe that could play a role, but it is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to break down the next fight right now. If you want to join me, join on that stream. I love and appreciate all of you. Until next time, deuces. And in 2014, so it's pretty much irrelevant. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to the next stream, guys. If you want to see my other breakdowns, if you want to see my other breakdowns, what do you call it? You can go to the live section and you'll find all of them. Renier, the Rizzler, let's go to the stream for Jessica Andrade and Jasmine.